Our New Testament lesson is from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 8, verses 26 to 39. They sailed on to the country of the Gadarenes, directly opposite Galilee. And as he stepped out onto the land, a madman from town met him. He was a victim of demons. He hadn't worn clothes in a long time, nor lived at home. He lived in the cemetery. When he saw Jesus, he screamed and fell before him and bellowed, "What business do you have messing with me? You're Jesus, Son of the High God, but don't give me a hard time." And the man said this because Jesus had started to order the unclean spirits out of him. And time after time, the demons threw themselves, the man, into convulsions. He had been placed under constant guard and tied with chains and shackles, but crazed and driven wild by the demons, he would shatter the bonds. And Jesus asked him, "What's your name?" "Mob. My name is Mob." He said, because demons afflicted him, and they begged Jesus desperately not to order them to the bottomless pit. A large herd of pigs was browsing and rooting on the hill near side. And the demons begged Jesus to order them into the pigs, and he gave the order. And even worse for the pigs than for the man, crazed, they stampeded over the cliff and to the lake and drowned. And those tending the pigs, scared to death, bolted and told their story in town and the country. And people went out to see what had happened. And they came to Jesus and found the man whom the demons had been sent sitting there at Jesus' feet, wearing decent clothes, making sense. It was a holy moment. And for a short time, there was more reverence than curiosity. But those who had seen it happen told how the demoniac had been saved. And later, a great many people from the Gadarenes country got together and asked Jesus to leave. Too much change, too fast. They were scared. So Jesus got back into the boats and set off. And the man who had been delivered from the demons asked to go with him. But he sent him back saying, "Go home and tell everything God did for you." And so he went back and preached all over, everywhere, what Jesus had done for him. Now you may recall this passage and have many memories of it, but I want to take a look at how it really is not just in the first century, it's in the 21st century that hearts and minds and lives are haunted by demons of fear and depression and doubt and distress and destruction. How destructive in our time. But these forces are at work. And interestingly enough, we see in this that they were frightened when they saw the power of one. And it's how those who know that Jesus presented something that they couldn't understand, and it stirred them for a moment, but then sent panic, not just into the pigs, but into the people. Because at that moment, he challenged the political, religious, and economic system of his time. Because Rome was brutally cruel. The Gadarenes had been persecuted as we don't get from just reading the passage. But you know, that's an autobiography of our time. Think of the people and places who are tormented by persecution, by oppression, and in such a way distressed of spirit that they despair and cry out, and there's no place to go. And they lose hope, and they lose any possibilities of seeing light. And And the curiosity of faith turns to fear when we have to look at that the systems of our time, political, religious, and economic, are not just and do not give to people, particularly the vulnerable, the oppressed, by the systems that we have structured and created for the few and not enough for the many. You know, our psalm is about anguishing of the spirit and discovering the joy, and how often we're afraid to feel that. But the whole story is about history now is how do we deal with feelings? How do we come to grips with all those things that haunt us and hope us, that guide us and fulfill us, and that we need to be able to experience all, because if we don't have the haunting, we don't get the hoping, the fulfilling, the goodness. And what Jesus came was about transforming, not just changing, but delivering lives and systems. But it's in almost every situation, any change is too much and too soon. And we'd hang on to the hold that haunts rather than be gripped by the hope that delivers. And so I want to give you 2 new books for your Bible. Now, I will put them in the Meeting House Monthly. But I think one of the most important books of our time, it's a new Pauline letter, is Brian Stevenson's Just Mercy. Have you read it? Oh, do you have a treat? It'll haunt you, but it'll hope you. Stevenson was a lawyer, and he heard the voices of people who were incarcerated, just like those who were locked in the cemetery. Our penal system is punitive and destructive, and life sentences are demeaning to life, and despair sets in, and we have to lock up our fears, even our own feelings. And so Brian Stevenson works with a population of people who have been given sentenced to death. And he works brilliantly. It's so like Paul that you got to put it in your Bible. You can't have it separate from that. And he offers, saying that the cry is for just mercy. Can we have a system that practices, perpetuates, and brings mercy to the tortured and the tormented? Or do we want to be like those who were afraid of Jesus, and the status quo with all its uncertainty is more important than opening it up so our feelings and lives are ventilated by life, not cursed by locked into a system of despair and death. But another one that I don't have a book of his, but on May 7th, Jean Vanier, who established the L'Arche communities and was an amazing spirit. You know of Jean and the work that he's done. Well, he was born of a well-to-do family in Canada. His father was the Governor General of the state, and he commanded an aircraft carrier during the time of the war. And when it was over, he went to Paris to help, and he saw the people coming off the trains from the camps. And then he witnessed the atomic bombs that were so destructive. And he said, I can't be a part of the power structure that's mixed more with death than with life. And so he went to a life in time of prayer and working with it. And he was in New York, and he'd been in New York City, and he met some of the Dorothy Day's people and the communities, and learned from others, and saw how people might and could be helped. And so he went back, and when he was talked to a priest and was ready to it, and was retiring away from the madness of life, he met two men who were in mental institutions and had no hope. And he invited them to live with him. And he worked with them. And he gave those who were dead dignity. And the L'Arche communities are those who bring people who are on the margins and edges of life. And his guiding word for mercy is cultivating the art of gentleness. Not the envy and fear and suspicion and hostility that is so prone in our society today, but the whole people where he could, in all his life, when he went through those who have joined them, he would always have time with them, so that every person, no matter where they were, had dignity and life. And they felt life because they weren't discarded and destroyed. They were dignified by the look of love. And so, if you haven't read him, he's too precious. And the L'Arche communities are so special.